This video is for my friends in the US. Technically for everyone, but especially for the people in the US. Because Sadhguru has been trying a lot to expand his reach there over the last 2 years by collaborating with Hollywood celebrities and YouTubers. Right now he's on a campaign, Save Soil, which I'm going to talk about later in this video, and as part of that, he has gone on The Daily Show and more recently the Joe Rogan podcast. I think we should take a look and see what he said. If you're only learning about Sadhguru aka Jaggi Vasudev and you're curious, I think the Joe Rogan interview with him is a great place to start. It saves you hours and days from having to piece together who he is from the thousands of videos on his channel. Before I watched the show, I didn't have great expectations going into it given Joe Rogan's reputation, but after I watched it, I'm really appreciative of how skeptical Joe was throughout the whole interview and not take what Sadhguru says at face value, which is what most of his followers do. Anyway, if you were born during the 70s or before, then you would remember this guy, Osho, or Bhagwan Rajneesh as he'd like to be called. Super popular guru who came from India to the US and started a cult. There's a great Netflix documentary on him called Wild Wild Country, which you should check out. Sadhguru is basically the same thing. Charismatic personality, flashy bugs and cars, flaunting their riches, millions of followers that worship them like a god. And I know some Osho fans watching this would already be halfway through the hate comment like, "You idiot! Osho is an atheist unlike Sadhguru." Sure, there are some nuances and differences between the two. No two people are perfectly alike. But aren't the commonalities far greater than the differences? Now, despite the image he might try and portray of himself, Sadhguru is a dubious character with several legal allegations against him and his foundation, questionable far-right political views and opinions, and it's no secret that I'm not a fan of the guy. But I try to keep all the criticisms I have of him on my channel fact-based, evidence-based, and science-based. And he gives you a lot of content that you can criticize, like his opinions on biology and medicine and physics that make him seem so knowledgeable, but he's really not, as I'm going to show you. And after that, I'm going to talk about his Save Soil campaign. So what are we waiting for? Let's begin. The talk starts off like this.
This leaf, an empty stomach, if you just chew 2 leaves, they're not very pleasant to eat.
Okay.
It is a great blood purifier.
Blood purifier?
Yes.
How does it purify your blood?
It has the necessary juices in it to do that.
The necessary juices.
Now, it may seem like there's a very small thing that I'm nitpicking here, but there's a great example to show you the way Sadhguru operates. He presents claims like these as facts without any evidence, and the claims only get bigger and more extraordinary as the podcast goes on. Medical claims, claims about biology and physics, claims about reality, all presented with either no evidence or flimsy evidence. And when questioned, he tries to evade with answers like these. Here are some more examples.
Today, what we are right now, over 60% of our body is actually microorganisms. Only 40% is our parental genetics. Rest is all microorganisms. What we are now is a reflection of what's in the soil. The moment you weaken the soil, life on the planet will start becoming weak.
I don't know where he's getting the 60% figure from, because bacterial and microbial cells outnumber human cells in the body by 10 times or something, so that's what, 91%? But all this accounts to some 1 to 2 grams in an adult body, so that's what, 1 to 3% by mass? So I don't know where the 60% is coming from. How is he reaching a conclusion about life and soil from here? I mean, living things do have microbes in them, soil has microbes in them, but this doesn't mean that if we weaken soil, you weaken the living things as well. That's a fallacy. He's falsely equating the two. Now, you can say that there are micronutrients in the soil which reach a living organism, so that way, yeah, there is weakening of life when you weaken the soil, but microbes are not the reason.
There are certain countries which are suffering this whole coronavirus much more than the other. I don't want to make a absolute statement about this. The simple doctor will tell you, if you lack vitamin A, vitamin B6, B12, D, E, folate and iron and zinc and magnesium you will become susceptible to upper respiratory tract infections. This is a known fact.
I spoke to a virologist and no, deficiency in micronutrients don't make you more susceptible to COVID-19. I mean, yeah, it makes you generally unhealthy and that makes you susceptible to all diseases in general, but you can't make this broad conclusion from here. Again, this may seem like a small thing that I'm nitpicking here, but this is a much bigger problem if you look at his channel. He constantly keeps spouting out medical advice when he clearly has no clue. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. From around 40 minutes to the 1 hour mark, Joe keeps trying to ask him this question. What tools are you trying to give your followers so that they can deal with problems in their lives? I don't know why, but this is 20 minutes of Sadhguru trying to wade this question.
How does one get to that spot? Like, what you're saying sounds wonderful. I mean, you're a guru.
No,
like, look at him.
It's not
He's wise
easier.
and
It is
enlightened.
not easy or difficult.
You got a great beard.
It is not easy or difficult.
It's not?
It is a question of wrong direction or right direction.
So what do you say to someone, maybe they're 30 years old, and they've had this life of mistakes, but they want to be conscious, the journey they're on?
Though human beings are not the strongest creatures on the planet compared to other species, why is it the human beings are dominating this world?
Okay, well, what are those tools? Like the scenario that I laid out. You have a person who's 30 years old, maybe they're alcoholics, they're trying to get their life in order.
In 2021, our video views are 2.2 billion.
But what I'm saying is,
it works is
what are those tools? This is all very like mystical and difficult for
it's,
people to grasp.
There are mystical aspects also.
Okay.
But that is not for everybody.
Politicians should learn from him. I mean, interviewers wouldn't stand a chance. He also says in between that his teachings work and that's why he has billions of views, when clearly that's not the only reason. He's mixing up correlation with causation.
Our video views are 2.2 billion.
2.2 billion video views?
Yes. Why? Because the only reason is it has worked.
But you're entertaining. You know, that's also one of the reasons why you have that many views. How many views do we have?
No, it's okay. Say 4 billion, it's okay.
Maybe. I don't know, probably about the same. Sounds about right.
Yeah, and we're not teaching you shit.
And I'm sure he could tell that Sadhguru was trying to evade the question, and I'm sure he just gave up because he wanted to take the interview forward. Speaking of which, let's move this video forward to the next chapter.
When I was 25, I just burst into an experience where suddenly every cell in my body was dripping ecstasy like that.
Suddenly?
Yeah, I was sitting on a rock and I burst out like this, and I realized if I just take my hands off my mind completely, every cell in my body just bursts out with blissfulness. I made a plan. In 2.5 years' time, I will make the whole world ecstatic. Here I am 40 years later. It took me time to realize people are so deeply invested in their miseries that even if you offer them the best thing, they will go round and round and round around that, not getting the point.
When you listen to this part, you see the sense of megalomania and self-importance and grandiosity that he has, which is apparently common among cult leaders. You see how his own bias is so strong that he's so sure of his greatness that when he fails at convincing the world of his ideas, it's because everyone else is too invested in their own misery and not because his ideas may be flawed. And some of them are clearly wrong, as I've shown you, especially the science-based statements that he makes.
So everything that is physical in the universe needs a certain perfection of geometry to function at a certain level of competence. How an atom is made, how an amoeba is made, how you are made, how the universe is made, the fundamental design is not different. So this is what today we're calling as the carbon chain on this planet. Whether it's a microorganism or a tree or the atmosphere or the water or a human being, everything is one chain. If you break one link, everything could collapse on your head. It is the geometry which keeps it going.
Initially, when he said this, I thought he was talking about the chain of carbon atoms that are found in any organic molecule, but then he talked about the atmosphere and the water, and he did this, and then I realized he was talking about the carbon cycle. Two questions. One, how does geometry play a part here? I mean, is this what you're calling geometry? You do realize this is a schematic and has nothing to do with geometry, right? This is what happens when Sadhguru starts speaking science. He just says something that's vaguely in the ballpark that sounds about right to a layperson, but to anyone who has studied basic science, they can point out exactly where it goes terribly wrong. Second thing, you know that the atmosphere is also a link in the carbon cycle, right? So when you go from London to India on your superbike as part of this campaign, that is polluting the atmosphere and weakening that link, right? Do you not realize this? Let's see where it goes with this perfection of geometry argument.
It is the geometry which keeps it going. For example, this planet is going around the sun. There is no titanium chain or a cable holding it to the sun and swinging it around. If you just get it off its path, finished, it'll fly off somewhere else.
No, Sadhguru, the planets are in the sun's gravitational field. You can't just take it off its path and expect it to fly off. The planets will go into another stable orbit depending on its velocity or fall back into the sun. You need to give something sufficient escape velocity for it to escape out of a gravitational field. Which is why we need to launch rockets like this if they are to reach Mars or the outer planets. Again, to the average layperson, what he's saying sounds like it makes sense, but basic science will tell you that he's completely wrong. This is the part of the podcast where things start getting interesting. Sadhguru starts talking about extraterrestrial and supernatural life and stuff. So let's listen to this and exercise some critical thinking.
We've done things with it in the past.
We've done things with it?
Yes, we've done some experiments with such life. We have made people experience this very strongly.
You?
Yes.
So how?
Don't go into it.
Why not?
I have a reputation of being very logically correct.
Well, if you're logically correct about extraterrestrials, wouldn't that be beneficial to people that are hearing this?
I really admire the skeptical yet respectful way in which Joe is asking questions. Sadhguru responds by saying our logic and language are insufficient to describe other kinds of life that exist. He initially refuses to talk about it, but on further probing by Joe, he gets into this experiment that he did.
We have done experiments where we attracted certain life which doesn't have any texture of earthly life.
And how do you conduct these experiments?
I used certain people to invite them into their bodies, and what happened there is totally unbelievable for people.
Before he gets into the story, I want you to notice how he uses words like certain.
I used certain people.
In stories like this, it's not just this story, in literally every claim he makes, he says something that makes it vague by using words like certain, and this is just a way of making his claims untestable.
I invited a certain life into one person's body. The weather was already like nearly zero, kind of sub-zero kind of atmosphere. It was in Tibet. And I kept a bowl of water about 3 inches above the head. And when this life entered and I tried to hold it within that body, the water started boiling because it created so much heat. Then I let it go because it could burn up the person.
Did you film this?
Huh? From a distance they filmed it, bad filming, they were not really looking for it, but it is there.
And how did you know that it was a thing? Like, how did you know that you could experience it that way and exhibit it, put it on display for the people that are watching?
Well, see, your whole perception right now for most human being is limited to 5 senses.
And he waits a question. Did you film this? From a distance, they couldn't really get it on camera. How did you know that you could actually do this? See, dodge the question. I have many more questions that I want to ask. Like, if you knew that you were inviting another form of life into a person's body, why would you not film it and make sure you get it on camera? That would have been pretty strong evidence, but you come here with nothing. Just a bunch of witnesses who are your followers who I'm sure wouldn't dare disagree with you. There is so much more in the podcast. I wish I could include it all, but I don't want this video to be too long. In fact, I feel this is already too long and I might have to cut some sections out during the edit. But there is one section that you probably really want to hear me talk about, and that is, what do I think of safe soil? This is not the first time he's doing a campaign like this for an environmental cause. There have been a few in the past. Let's take Cauvery calling as an example. Cauvery is a river in South India that once had plenty of water all year round but has been drying up a lot recently prior to the monsoons. The aim in the campaign was to plant 46 million trees on the river's basin with the aim of revitalizing the river. The trees would, one, help bring about rainfall, and two, prevent soil erosion from happening on the banks of the river. This project has gotten a lot of criticisms from ecologists and scientists for looking at the issue very simplistically and focusing only on planting the same kind of tree instead of reforestation that suits the landscape, which will do a far better job at stabilizing the groundwater levels, which will keep the river from drying up. The project also does nothing to combat the root cause of the issue, which is the rapid urbanization in the river's basin and the multiple dams that have been constructed on the river, which affect its flow and the ecosystem around it. I linked to an article down below that goes in detail into all this. There is also no evidence that planting trees at the scale of a river's basin can help bring about rainfall. That can only happen with reforestation of much larger continental scales. So it's clear that this project was planned and executed without any prior research, almost as if the Isha Foundation didn't care if this project was successful or not. So okay, if you remove all this tree planting aspect from this project, then what remains? Sadhguru riding a bike across South India marketing himself. Come to think of it, that's exactly what he did on this campaign called #RideWithSadhguru, where he toured the US on his bike. Only there was no pretext of an environmental cause to get more people to care. You know what does have that environmental cause? Save soil. I mean, nobody who genuinely cared about the environment would travel in a fossil fuel guzzling superbike and increase their own carbon footprint and damage one part of the environment to save another. My guess is that this is just a marketing and PR stunt he's pulling to increase his own exposure internationally and pull in more followers. But I have to say, I really admire his marketing team for getting him on all these shows that are watched by huge audiences. I mean, most people watching these shows, at least the ones that are seeing him for the first time, would be more interested in him and what he has to say than saving soil. I'd love to be proven wrong though. I'd love to see something positive come out of this project, but judging by his previous track record, I don't think that's gonna happen, so I'll remain very skeptical. And before you put a hate comment saying that this video was funded by someone who hates Sadhguru, let me stop you right there. You're right, George Soros paid me $1 million to make this video. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Till then, remember, science is dope.